Hey everyone, I'm Bob Glazer. I'm the founder of Acceleration Partners, a global marketing agency, and the author of the book Elevate, which was recently released. And today we're going to be talking about how to give up your excuses, build your capacity, and become the leader that you know you can be.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? Are you willing to push beyond your limits and unlock the success in yourself and others? If you are, listen up, because we're about to get into it. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, of course, so please get over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday. You can also catch us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. With a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show, we are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're an entrepreneur, CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, whatever capacity that you are in a leader, you know that someone walking away with 2 weeks notice can throw your team and your deadlines into complete turmoil. So is there a way to inspire change in yourself and in your team to break free from what's holding you down and in the process, potentially eliminate that 2 weeks notice paradigm? Well, let's find out together. Our guest on this episode is Bob Glazer. He is the founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners, a global performance marketing agency who work with companies like Air-B&B, Uber, Adidas, Target, etc. He is a creator of Friday Forward, an inspirational newsletter that is read by over 100,000 people each week. He's also a TEDx speaker who is passionate about sharing his ideas to help people and organizations grow. And he's the author of a brand new book called Elevate. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Bob Glazer!
Clearly, I need to have some more coffee.
You do?
Yeah. Thank
Good
you,
morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, mate.
Good.
I'm glad to have you here. And yes, I have my coffee in hand, like the last time we met when you were here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
When was that? Was that the spring? It was spring,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
that feels like a while ago, but it was the spring, yeah.
And where were you off to? You were on your way to somewhere. You were going
Actually,
somewhere
it
else.
was over the summer. Yeah, we went from there to Victoria Island and then to the Salt Lake City. So it was a little summer trip.
Right, with your whole family, right?
Actually, we were with a bunch of friends. Kids were all at camp. So
That's right. Kids were all at camp, and
we're
you
New Englanders. For the rest of the world, they look at us with crazy heads. But our kids all go to overnight camp, and they love it. We could talk about that. I think it's a huge. It's built on leadership tenets. These camps. So.
Well, did you go to those camps?
I did. I went to overnight camp, and so did my wife.
Right, and so they influenced you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in independence, I am not a helicopter parent. I am the opposite. I enjoy and relish in my independence and in helping make my kids more independent.
So that's it. I mean, let's just start there for a minute. We weren't planning on going there, but let's start there because you just said it. It's part of leadership. Tell us, tell us first of all, give everybody the concept of what these camps are, And then
Sure.
tell us how you think that impacted or influenced you as a leader.
Yeah. So, I mean, people probably get a little astonishment, but not right away. But all three of my kids this year go to a 7-week camp up in Maine. The boys go to a boys camp, girls go to a girls camp. And there's visiting day in the middle where we come up, but there's no technology all summer. We write letters to them, or we send an email and they print it out and give it to them. They write letters to us. I talk about when they go to camp, like, I can't control them, the rules. Like, I go over our family values with them. I go over what's important to us. And you know, I always joke when, like, you forget your shoes, you don't play in the game. You don't put on sunscreen, you get burned. So a lot of they're really just active all day long. They're trying new things. They have some electives, some things they have to do. The camps are very much about, they don't push people, but you kind of have to participate. And I find they try activities and do things that on their own that I would have never been able to have them do. They send us their speeches because they have to run for something called Color War, where the camp sounds bad in today's day and age, but they divide into the 2 colors of the camp, like red and blue or blue and white. Mm-hmm. And they compete for a week or a couple weeks, and they have to, make their beds, and they have to prepare songs, and they play in games. And each of those teams are led by a captain of each age in the overall team. All of my kids have been Color War captains. They've had to write speeches. They've had to give those speeches in front of everyone. I couldn't edit the speech. And then, my 10-year-old has to set—
as much as you might want to.
Yeah. The biggest joke, I wrote an article on what you can learn about leadership from camp, but my 10-year-old had to set lineups, for the A team and the B team. So people come and complain to him, and, that they're on the B team and not the A team. And someone joked, yeah, welcome to management, kid. So it's really, I think it's a great environment for them to explore, do things on their own. The no technology in today's day and age. They're just, it's human connection, and they're busy, they're outdoors, they're dirty all day long. Like, it's what kids are supposed to do.
But aside from, obviously, I agree with you that it's what kids are supposed to do, but so many foundations of leadership right there, right? Yeah. How do you learn leadership when you get a badge for just showing up? How do you learn leadership when everything's there and helicoptered? How do you actually ever really find your own voice? So it's really interesting to me, because you and I talked about this over breakfast when we met, that your kids were there, and you told me how you had gone. And we talked about how this is foundational for leadership. It's kind of like, there's a lot of 30-year-olds right now that we want to send to camp.
These curriculums are 150 years old. And, the thing that they're really focused on is intrinsic motivation. So think about, there's a lot of sports and intra-camp sports at camp, right? You play for yourself and you play for your team. There's no swing the bat and look around for mom or dad's approval. All of this stuff is really about you and removing a lot of the coaching from the side and all that stuff. And no one would say that the sports are any better. I can't even show, I have to stand in certain places on some of my kids' soccer games and stuff, because the level that the parents are involved in living out their failed athletic dreams, in putting that pressure on their kids is absurd.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a great launch pad for what we're talking about here, because your book is Elevate. And I want to talk about what that actually means in a minute, because you run a global company that has grown 1,000% in the last decade, with a turnover rate that's a quarter of that of your industry. I remember us talking about this as we had breakfast together. So tell us what inspired Elevate, the book.
So Elevate was not the book I set out to write. It actually, I'll give you the long version because it brings all these things together, the business and otherwise. So right about after I went to a pretty intensive 5-day leadership program about 5 or 6 years ago, one of the things that came out of that was really focusing on a morning routine, starting the morning, being intentionally, getting up early, exercising, quiet time to think, to read, to write. And the reading was focused on kind of motivational or positive, like read something that's like inspiring in the morning, not the news, which will get you, thinking that the world is a terrible place, especially these days. So I did this, but the books they gave us just didn't do it for me. And a few weeks after I got back from that, I said, you know what, I've got these interesting stories. I got some quotes, like maybe I'll write something. What I'll do is I'll send it to my team on Fridays, and I called it Friday Inspiration. And it wasn't about our business, and our team's distributed, and it was really about kind of a story or challenging a belief or pushing them to do something, and kind of about personal growth or professional growth. And I sent them, and I didn't think anyone was reading them, but I was enjoying writing them because it was sort of like a journal writing exercise for me. It helped clarify my thoughts on some stuff. And for 5 or 6 weeks, I actually did start to get notes back from people, and they said, I really enjoy this. I sent it to my dad. I sent it to my brother. He sent it to his company. Here's the feedback. And I was at an event with a bunch of EO, Entrepreneurs Organization members, then a few months later, and we just talked about best practices. And I said, I've been writing this newsletter to my team on Fridays, or this note. I'm getting great feedback. It's a really good engagement tool. And a bunch of them said, oh, well, that's interesting. Like, send it to me and we'll take a look. So I sent it to 4 or 5 of them. We're in the discussion. One of them did the same thing and has been doing it this year. And like good entrepreneurs, the other 4 said, awesome, we'll forward this to our team every Friday. And what happened was it started to go around, and eventually people were asking to be on, and it was just an email, and I didn't have the old one. So I set up a WordPress template with the old ones. I converted to a newsletter list because it just looked like a normal email, but I just couldn't manage the BCCs. And I threw a few more friends and families and colleagues on it, and I figured I'd get a bunch of hate mail or like, what the hell is this, or take me off of it. and they also started saying, hey, this is great, or thanks, or I forwarded. And so at that point, I kind of settled on a formula. I renamed it Friday Forward. I opened it up, and someone wrote an article in Inc. who was on that list. 2,500 people signed up, and then years later, it was almost 100,000 people. So I went to write this book, which was a compilation of all these stories, figuring a lot of people hadn't heard these stories.
Sure.
And, some of the early, it's like music. You probably wrote your best stuff before anyone knew about you.
Yes.
And I met with a bunch of the agents. They're like, yeah, no one buys compilation books. And I heard that 3 or 4 times. They're like, I was like, I got all these people reading this thing. And they're like, yeah, but you put the material out there. And then I met my agent, Rick, and he said the same thing, but he said, I really love these stories. I love your writing. I think you have a bigger story here. And so I sat down to figure out, like, what was it that I was writing about? And it took me about 18 months. And eventually, it was not a overnight epiphany, because it was an 18-month epiphany. But I realized that actually the strategy that I had used to improve my life, the strategy we had used to grow our business, and the strategy of why Friday Forward was making an impact on all these strangers all around the world was actually all the same thing. And it was this notion of capacity building. And so while it was not the book that I intended to write, I actually think it was the book I was meant to write. And I had to sort of struggle through that process to figure it all out. And so today, we even have orchestrated a lot of our leadership training specifically around those principles. We were always doing those things, but now we have the labels for them.
But Friday Forward was in many ways, if you will, the lubricant for this book. It sort of got you ready for it, right?
Yeah, and what I've done since is I've re-taxonomized all the Friday Forwards under one or more of the capacities and said, look, these are a story. They're all about one or more of these things. But yeah, it was clearly the catalyst. And for me, like, I'm not sure I would have put it all together because if I didn't realize that the same impact that we were having on employees was made on people that I didn't even know through this simple email.
So you brought up something there that I want to de-jargonize and make clear for everybody, because you talk about the power of capacity building.
Yeah.
So let's take the jargon out of that and make sure that people understand that, because what most people understand that to mean is, well, I can work another couple of hours a week because I've got some capacity.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not what you're talking about at all. So tell us what you mean by the power of capacity building.
Sure. So I'll just define the 4 elements to sort of set it up. So to me, the capacity building is how you get better in a summary. And there's 4 elements: spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional. And these are not new. They're used in different contexts. I sort of brought together for this purpose of capacity. But spiritual is who you are, what you want, what are your core values, what's your North Star. It's not religious. Intellectual to me is like your operating system. This is how do I learn, get faster, get better, get more disciplined, focus, hopefully in service of the things in spiritual capacity. Right. Physical is your your stress levels, your health, your competitive, just, your physical well-being. And then emotional is where it gets tricky. The first three are kind of you. Emotional is how you relate to the outs. And I separated, I came across mental a lot and energy, but to me, there was a real distinction in capacity between the intellectual stuff, and the emotional stuff. And the emotional to me is how you interact with the rest of the world. So things that you don't control, other people, relationships, resilience, like all of the things with the external world. And what your point was exactly on, because what we understand physical capacity, we understand that if I pick up this barbell and I can't even get to 4, if I actually sit down for 90 days and I do 1 rep and then 2 reps, I can probably do 25 of these reps, and it's actually easier in 90. I struggled to do 4 today, and in 90 days, I'll do 25. I think in these other areas, we tend to think we have something or we don't. I have a purpose, or I know where I'm going or I don't, or I'm good at this or I'm known, or I have bad relationships or I don't. It's actually the same process to work on these other things and these other areas, and they're all really interconnected. And as you said, it's not about doing more. To be really clear, it is not about in fact, I would say if intellectual capacity is your operating system, if you upgrade your operating system, it typically uses less energy and crunches tasks faster. If my biggest struggle in life is that when I have to have a difficult conversation, I can't sleep the night before, I can't handle it as a leader. Otherwise, I've got to upgrade my software for that. I got to go read Radical Candor and read Patty McCord's book and listen to 5 podcasts. And then I come in and I don't lose sleep over those conversations, and they don't wear on me all day. And I actually improve my ability to do that. So that's an example that would cross over between kind of intellectual and emotional. So I think these 4 things cover all of the basis of self-improvement, but by putting a simple framework around it, I think people are able to see where they can do the work, where they're out of whack, because I think you need all of them to really achieve at a high level.
Of those 4, which was the most challenging for you? Which one did you struggle with the most? The longest time?
This goes into the consciously incompetent category, but I think I probably struggled with spiritual capacity because until you solve that, you don't realize that you've been running around without the instruction manual for yourself for 20 years. So I was actually excited to, and it's consciously incompetent because most of us don't even realize that we need to understand this or what it is. But once I understood it, I was actually psyched to work on it, and I worked on it, and it wasn't painful at all. But looking back, it's a little painful to be like, oh, wow, I would have made really different decisions had I had this clarity that I have now about what my core values are.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is that we are usually a couple hundred miles down the path before we actually go, what path am I on?
Yeah.
What path is this? Right. And that's the problem, because oftentimes if you're a couple hundred miles down the path and you go, what path am I on? And you realize it might not be the right path. A lot of people will go, oh, well, I'm on it anyway, I might as well just keep going. Other people will go, oh, that's it, I'm a failure, and stop and hang out in the ditch. And it takes great courage to say, you know what, I need to go back 50, 60, maybe 100 miles and redirect. That takes courage. And that is what you're talking about here with Elevate, is really coming back to the base for you and saying, okay, what is the truth? Because you may have gone down a road a long way in the wrong direction.
Well, I have sort of I have kind of a, what it looks like if you're totally missing one of these things. And this is the situation you described. Let's pretend my spiritual capacity is really low. I haven't done any work, but I'm really good on intellectual, physical, and emotional. I'm likely to be world-class at something that brings me no enjoyment or happiness, right?
Exactly.
That's what you see, where I've chased some external definition of success. And for me, the core values is a little bit, the analogy I like is if you're people, I think it's a process of actualization. I think they've always been there. They're defining moments. You know it by feel, but you just can't put a label on it. So imagine if you're driving a car down a tunnel and it's dark. When you hit the wall and smash into it, you do. So then you pull off and then you hit the other wall. Well, if someone painted the lines for you, you'd probably get to where you were going with a lot less damage on your on your car. And I've worked with a lot of our team members on helping them figure out their personal core values. And I mean, I know you know this because I know the type of work you do, but it runs deep. Like it flips into childhood and stuff really quickly, but it frees them to understand like why, oh my God, I'm fighting with this employee because they have the same thing about my mom that's bothered me my entire life. And that was actually a discussion that we had recently, with someone.
Yeah, and because of the conversation we had, in the work that I do around primary drivers, is understanding that there is nothing new. Yeah. This shit you've got going on with that person is the same stuff that's been going on forever for you. And if you look at it, instead of looking at that employee or that potential partner or whatever it is and going, they're an idiot. If you look at it and go, okay, I'm the common denominator.
Yeah.
If I'm the common denominator, what is it that's in me that I've not dealt with yet? Because if you look at that, a lot of the problem will pretty much evaporate.
Right. Or you can realize this person's really just crossing one of my core values, but maybe they don't know it because I haven't explained it to them. Or maybe I need to understand that this is a point of our values that just clash. And so now I learned to put some, words around that. But I've gotten, as I'm sure you have, I've gotten very good at picking up on keys that people say. And I tend to ask this question. Like, so I was at a conference recently and this woman was drawing these incredible, board where you talk and then they put it all in a visual board behind you and a storyboard. Cool, eh? Yeah. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, how did you learn to do this or whatever? And she said to me, my purpose is to help people be seen and heard. And look, you've talked to a lot of people, like 2 out of every 100, like had that clear of a purpose when I didn't even ask what her purpose was. So right away I said, well, let me ask you, does that come from like a personal place for you or something in childhood? Because that's really specific. And she said, well, yeah, I mean, I stuttered for the first 15 years of my life and I couldn't communicate effectively at all. And the more I ask these questions, the more I keep hearing those sort of answers.
Yeah, it's never unrelated. And this is, again, why it's important that the 4 elements that you talk about, is that so often we like to compartmentalize, these 4 areas. We like to say, well, that one doesn't matter as much as this one. And the truth is, as you outlined very well, is that all 4 matter. And you may have a preference for one of the 4. You may have a preference for physical because you love to run or work out or whatever it is. Or you may have a preference for the intellectual because you love to be bright and study and all the rest of it, or whatever it is, any one of those things.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, you're not going to really actualize or elevate yourself without all 4.
Yeah,
right?
As soon as you said that, I thought of examples, right? If you're this intellectual genius who can't communicate with everyone, has no good relation, your message will have 0 amplification, right? It won't reach anyone. And a lot of people are, running triathlons and stuff, and they just switched one addiction for the other because they're trying to hide from stuff. So yeah, they are very interconnected. I think of it as a ball, and if you want to increase the mass, you need to grow it like that, because otherwise it's gonna kind of roll a little funny.
Absolutely, all the edges at the same time. So let's talk about mindful transitions. And particularly this, I talked about it in the introduction, this 2-week notice paradigm with companies. And as I said, you've had, I think it was like, what did you say? Like, I can't remember what the percentage was, but so much lower than people in your industry. You've done something very different there. And I know that it's based around this understanding of values and how those work. So just walk us through this, because I think that people really need to get this on both sides, both as an employer and as an employee. There's the anxiety of, oh my God, this person's coming in my office, and if they walk away, I'm dead in the water, because they're juggling this deadline and they got the whole team working. Or on the other side, I'm being called into the office and, oh my God, I could get 2 weeks notice, and shit, I just bought a boat or whatever it is, right? So walk us through it a bit.
Well, just to set the stage, because I know you have a global audience. So I think a lot of times there's different statutory things in different countries. But,
Yes.
In the US, for some reason, and it's become the social standard that, an employer giving 2 weeks notice, employee giving 2 weeks notice is kind of the right thing to do. In this economy and stuff, we've got stories of 1 day notice, in places, or people not even showing up to jobs.
After lunch.
Yeah, and on the flip side, I say it's the paradigm, because companies just say, Doug, thanks so much, out of the blue, you've been great, here's 2 weeks severance. And so we're not in lifetime employment anymore. Reid Hoffman wrote this book about the alliance, and then people are sort of in the alliance. And I think we just need to change the whole narrative of, we don't offer pension and lifetime benefits, and I don't expect that people are going to work here forever, and nor should they expect that they'll work here forever. But this whole taboo about having a conversation of it is real. And to be clear, this starts with a company. So I always like to be clear when I talk about this. Like, I don't think employees should go having these honest conversations if the company doesn't reward it, because you'll have this problem. But I have a lot of leaders tell me, well, when people, and I've had this argument with people in our company, when people give 2 weeks notice, like, we just ask them to leave that day because they're disengaged and otherwise, and I just ask them, it's just better for everyone, or why are we going to pay them if we're not engaged? I'm like, that's great. That is, you are maximizing your return on that situation. But guess what? Everyone else in the room just saw that, and you're worried about people stealing. People always say, well, what if they steal? What if they do this stuff? I'm like, this is just the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. So everyone else in the room saw that Peter gave 2 weeks notice and he got walked out that day. So if Jane wants to steal and she's leaving in 4 weeks, she's going to steal before she gives you 2 weeks notice, not after she's given you her notice. She's going to copy all the files and take what she's going to take. So, but what that does is it really impacts the next person. So
yes,
we've said, look, we don't want this. There are going to be situations where you want to do something else. There are going to be situations, frankly, where we need something else or otherwise. But what we want you to do is come to us to have a conversation. We've put it out there. And look, a lot of people still don't do it. And they tell us, frankly, at the end that, you know what, I just chose to take care of myself. Like, I couldn't trust it. But we've said, we told people to call us out, that if they come to us or their manager and they say, I'm thinking about something different, or it's not what I want to do, they will never be walked to the door. We will work on a transition plan with them. We will figure out something as long as they're continuing to do their work at a high level. And so we call these either employee initiated or employer initiated. And what we do is we have people who are working here right now, who are on transitions, who are maybe looking for a job, but still doing their job. And if I was trying to maximize the transaction, I would say, yeah, like, well, we're client services actually, so it really does help to have them here. I would say, yeah, like, I should not let that person work here for 3 months. I should let them work here for 3 weeks. But if I do that, then I'm not going to get the next person who's willing to have an honest discussion. So we've really put it out there. We've told people they can call us out at any time if that doesn't happen. But when we start these discussions, we end up supporting them through this process. And what happens is they can be currently employed when they're looking for a job. They can have a reference from their current employer. They can show that they have a good relationship with their current employer, and we've helped them with outplacement services or otherwise, and give them the cover of an active job. But what's nice about this is that if we develop this and we keep communicating it back, and this has taken us years, it's not been easy, but people will come to us and start a discussion about, hey, I'm not sure this is what I want to do. And I always say that the people at your company who quit and stay are far more dangerous than the people that quit and leave. There's people in your company now who decide they're quitting a year ago. Like, they've left your business mentally a year ago, and they're just sitting around for the perfect thing, deleverage their situation. Then we'll let you know, and they'll let you know once they've all ready to go and leave, because they know that you're going to tell them to leave that day.
It's interesting because I use this analogy on stage in my presentation, and I said, what is the divorce rate? I'll ask a leadership audience, what's the divorce rate? And people go 50%, which is actually not quite true, but it's pretty close. Okay, so we go through these whole things, and I said, but when you go through all the stats, there's something you've forgotten that doesn't get calculated, and they go, oh, it's that. The people who are divorced but are still married, people who are emotionally divorced but are still married.
For the
So
kids,
here's
for the kids, right?
right
Everybody,
for the
yeah.
kids, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes the kid. So then I translate that into corporate and say, well, what if the kids are the money?
Yeah.
So what if half your employees have already divorced from you, from production, from being engaged? They're not trying to make this marriage work, but they're there for the kids, meaning the money, and they're not actually leaving. And so the question is, what environment is that?
Yeah.
Is that a loving environment? Is that somewhere you would want to be? And the answer is, of course, no. It's a terrible environment. So, there's this moral issue as well with this entire thing. And really what you're talking about, which I love, Bob, and we talked about this, is that you are challenged as a leader, you are challenged as an employer to create an environment of trust where they being, your employees, can trust that you're going to tell the truth and that it's okay for them to tell the truth. So listen, Charlie, you kind of suck as an accountant, but I see you've got amazing skills in HR. We don't have any room for HR right now. It's not a place for us right now, but we think that that's your real skill. We'd like to help you transition out of this into a HR position, because really, I know you went to school for accounting, but you're kind of like, obviously you're not really interested.
Yeah.
And then Charlie can say,
what, you're
right.
Right. This is a humanistic discussion. So one of the things people confuse about our culture and a lot of the awards that we won, we're also like try to be number one in our industry. We've grown 35%. Like, we're a tough, fast-paced work environment. It's not for everyone. The really interesting thing, and I would love to engage some research psychologists to go into this, because this is what I've learned, and this is the key struggle in mindful transition. And again, because it's not about me, it will come down to our managers. And have our managers made their teams comfortable enough to have the discussion, and they don't feel left and pissed and hurt, and they understand that, but the problem is people can't separate the person and the job. And so rather than, what happens is like Dov, I know you're just not going to make it, right? But I really like you. So from a cognitive dissonance standpoint, what my brain does, it doesn't actually use those two things. It starts to go, well, I start making up stories to myself to make me feel better about the difficult thing that I need to do to you, because I would never fire a bad guy, right? So I need to I'm like, oh, see, he missed that thing, and God damn it, And so now I sort of ruin my personal relationship. This is not, I just want to be clear, this is not easy. We still struggle with this. We do all this training, we teach people, we give them the best material, but we actually encourage people to lean into that, exactly like you said. Dov, love you, would love to hang out with you, whatever. The accounting mistakes that are going on and stuff, this just is not a good fit, right? So exactly, is there something else that you'd like to do here? If not, how can I help you go find that role? And we call everyone that leaves alumni. And this isn't, I think that's how people have to think about it. They go into our future clients, McKinsey doesn't get enough credit. They've done this forever. You want to leave McKinsey, they give you money, they train you, they send you into the world, and everyone hires McKinsey. So rather than worrying about all these ex-employees, I think, Patty McCord and Kim Scott have really leaned into this. People can handle the truth if you're willing to tell it to them. Most managers are just not willing to tell them the truth and or do it in a respectful way, which is, I care about you. I'd love to see you land on your feet, but man, you're just not doing a good job in this job. And that's not going to work for us going forward.
But that, you and I talked about this when we met, because this is a big part of my work too, is courageous conversations, is that willingness to have a conversation about what you're pissed about, what doesn't work for you, what you're upset about, and to do it in a way that has compassion and not be overrun by the fact of, listen, you made 15 accounting mistakes, and that is valid, and you have every right to be upset about that. But at the same time, understanding that this is a human being, and that it's not I think it's very rare for an employee to know that to not know that they're bad. Right? I think that's one of the big mistakes of people. It's oh, he just didn't know he was bad.
There's a sense of relief you see a lot of times. Where
exactly, that's it. Yeah, they're okay, I got caught.
Right. This discussion, the whole thing though, is this discussion has to happen much earlier in the process. I agree. Patty McCord and I had a whole debate about this. I think PIFs are there's there's a time and place, but in general, it's just whatever the lawyer tells you, people sue because they feel disrespected. So giving someone a 10-page litany of stuff that they did wrong, telling them they have 30 days to get better at it and hoping they fail is not helping anyone, versus having an honest discussion. Like, here's an example, and I'll give you kind of a real world look into something we just dealt with, because I don't think we handled it as well as I would like to. Someone was making a lot of mistakes and in a role. And I think, and these were a newer manager kind of handling this. And so typically, like, hey, look, these are all these mistakes you're making, and this is kind of below our standards. And the real issue was that our environment was way too fast paced for this person. They hadn't worked in client service. Like, now they're getting more nervous. Now they don't have the trust. And rather than, and what they were made to feel was like, I don't get it. I've been successful elsewhere. I've never had a problem. Like, and again, they've never worked client service side before. They mostly worked in-house. But what they walk away, they're feeling bad about themselves, and I don't get it, versus having a discussion and saying, look, this is probably not the right environment for you. You are smart. Clearly you're smart. We hired you, you're great. But clearly, like, when there's ambiguity and stress, you don't do your best. And we're not gonna be able to change that about our environment. And trying to train you to handle this, midway in your career, like, you've been so successful in these other environments. I know you like the company and this stuff, but I don't think this is an environment for you to be successful in. Like, that's the conversation to have, not to make the person, and that's the emotional intelligence you have to see about why this isn't working, not you're just making all these mistakes. Writing up 10 pages of a litany of mistakes is not helpful.
Yeah, but again, this is the thing that I think so often leaders or managers fail in.
Yeah,
is the emotional intelligence side, is to speak to the human, and they go, well, this is a job, and I have to this is a company, we have to make money, and we've got to address the real things. And I'm like, do you think people's feelings are not real to them? That's crazy. You didn't hire them because they were bad. You hired them because you saw them as good. And this, they don't come to work wanting to fail. So that's the other thing that I think that we often forget as leaders. People don't come to work and go, oh, how can I really stab this company in the ass?
They don't feel good, but they double down. It's hard for them to see that it's not the right, like, we struggle because of the culture and what people see, for them to realize that, like, what their vision, it's like the restaurant that you just convinced yourself, and you're like, I just don't like their food. Versus you convinced themselves it was going to be so great. Like, we're not right for everyone. I think sometimes the image they might build up is different than the reality. And then they have a really hard time with that because they're like, this should work, and they don't want to give up. But I've found consistently that if it starts poorly, it almost never ends well. It goes into a death spiral of trust, and everyone's working 4 times as hard to get to the baseline, which usually doesn't have a good outcome.
And it's the same, and again, back to the same analogy, the one I use from stage, which is, have you ever been on a date with somebody who is incredibly attractive? You're awesomely attracted to them, like they're delicious, and you're like frothing at the mouth, and then they start talking, and you're like, oh my God, I want to kill myself or poke myself in the ear with a fork just to get this over with.
Yeah.
And everything looks like it should be right, but something's wrong. And sometimes it's not anything they say, and sometimes it's not the way they look. It's just something's off. And that's an important thing to pay attention to. And it's no different in working with people. It's like, something's not right here. And it doesn't mean that person's wrong. And it doesn't mean that it just means they don't work in this environment.
Yeah, and you need to have a real conversation. Like, look, one of the best phrases ever, start with the end in mind, right? If you are giving someone a pip because you want them to fail and document their failure because HR told you to, frankly, that's terrible. I'm not a lawyer, but that's terrible advice.
I agree.
Have a real conversation with them. Tell them you want them to be successful. It might not be there. See how you can help them. Patty McCord had this line, I don't want you to fail. I don't want you to set you up to fail, but it's not what I need. And I don't think you have what I need. I don't think it's what you want to do. One of the lines I've been using recently in order for people to do that is like, I don't believe in this line. It's business. It's not personal. Like, that's crap that people hide behind. However, I do think that there are personal things that you need to deal with, and there are business decisions that you need to deal with. To me, they are separate. Like, so I need to make the right business decision because I've got much more jobs at stake and the profitability and otherwise. But that doesn't mean you just say, oh, it's business and not personal. There is a personal side.
It feels very personal.
Yeah.
Right. So you've written the book Elevate, and obviously that's about elevating ourselves as leaders, as human beings, as people, being better. And I know that you and I had this great conversation about this, that process of elevation, of elevating oneself, is not something one is done with. It is something that is ongoing. Yeah. And I think that oftentimes people can look at people like yourself and the level of success that you have and say, yeah, but Bob's there and I wish I was there. And that's not true, because it's always ongoing. What was one thing that you did for a long time that actually blocked you from your success?
Yeah, actually, before I answer that question and comment on something you just said, which is I like the term achievement more than success. I think a lot of times success is this external thing. So in your example, Bob could tell me, like, God, look at Bob. He's so successful. He's on here and he's got this book. And maybe my wife is not talking to me and my kids are angry at me and my employees hate me. Like, none of us would define that as success. Like, what you see from the outside is not there. The biggest thing that I have worked on the last couple of years, and I'm going through a cycle of struggling again, despite the articles and stuff I've written on, is saying no and walking away from things. Realizing that, it's easy to pick the really negative things, but the neutral ones. And like this, such a worthwhile cause. This person asked me to do it, but I think we tend to think that the thing right in front of us is more important than the things that we've already committed to. And I've really had to peel back, say no, go back to what I focused on, because my intuition of better and trying to fix things is to always want to get involved. Someone made an impassioned case for me to get involved in this charity. And I was like, I love what you're doing and it's awesome, but I committed to these two charities and I have goals for them. And then taking on yours and not getting anything done for all three is not better than delivering what I already committed to.
Absolutely. So is that the thing you did for a long time that blocked you, is not being able to say no?
I took on too much stuff. I tried to be a pleaser, and look, I'm seeing a cycle of this with the book, and lots of people want to reach out and have 20-minute conversations, and in theory I want to have them all, but a lot of those 20 minutes add up into a week pretty quickly.
Yeah, I understand. So what was the turning point in your life, in your leadership, in your business philosophy? Because, as you said, you get down the road, as we talked about getting a couple hundred miles down the road, realizing, oh, maybe I'm on the wrong path, or maybe I took a left turn somewhere. What was the turning point for you in your life, in your leadership, in your business philosophy?
Yeah, I think after that leadership program, and I had also been to something where I saw someone do a What's Your Why seminar a couple months before that, and that's when I was determined to figure this stuff out. And this is what helped me with the no, and I think this is, again, all ties into the process of capacity building. Once I figured out my values and what I wanted and my goals, and I locked in on those, and I started to see the traction, I really started to understand the opportunity cost of the other stuff, right? When we're spinning in a million directions, I don't think we see the opportunity cost. I'm really clear that the opportunity cost of me spending 30 minutes a day on Facebook is half of a book draft after 90 days, because I want to write more books. Like I'm really clear about what saying yes to something means now cost to me, because I'm locked in on, what I want, how I want to show up, what my core purpose is, how I want to live that. And then everything else that comes in around that, I have to make decisions around.
So, but what got you to realize that had to be the turning point for you? Because it's one thing, because you and I talking about this before, but it's one thing to realize something. It's another thing to take an action. It's oftentimes that's the difficult part.
I think I got through a turn of the flywheel. So I figured out my strategy. I figured out my purpose. I locked in on it. I went around the flywheel and I was like, oh, wow, look at stuff's happening. Like I'm getting this stuff done. It's happening, the things that I talked about. And so I actually think once the flywheel started spinning a little bit, I was really able to see that like I can get exactly what I want if I stay focused on it.
So at that point, how deep were you into your business?
So it all happened at an opportune time. So at that point was a real inflection point in the business. We were at probably about 5 million in revenue. We had doubled in the last year or two. So we were at that, probably broke half the people, half the processes. What happened was we had 6 core values in the business. So I came out of that experience, my personal core values and otherwise, and realizing, and we model this after our own leadership program. So I actually think you need to lead and you need to try on some stuff, you know, and I say, oh, Doug does this and Jane does that and Steve does that. And your leadership style becomes very patchwork. Yes. And for me, that was then, all right, I felt what felt good. I didn't what feel good. Then I really kind of figured out my authentic, like what I want to do. And I was going to stop apologizing for what I want to do. So I came back, I wrote a 3-year plan for the company. We cut our core values from 6 to 3. I said, this is what we're going to do unapologetically and where we're going. And if you don't want to be part of this or it doesn't excite you, kind of good time to exit stage left. And, you know, we lost some people and we got some different people who really were excited about that. And that was just a huge leg up. And I think that was really the transition me where I'm going to stop trying to think about what I think people want to hear or want to say. And I'm just going to tell people who I am and what I want. And the people that are psyched with that will sign up, and people otherwise. Like we now as a company, like we almost try to like chase people away during the interview process. You know, it's like you see these core values, right? I mean, I know you like them, but really if they're not you, you will not like working here because we reward on them. Our annual awards that we give out next week are the core value awards. We promote on them. Like I know you see Own It. Well, here's what Own It looks like. You make a mistake, we're going to ask you to write a debrief and share it with the team around what you learned about what everyone could do better based on that mistake. That's what it looks like here. And so I think I've become a little unapologetic in here's who I am, here's what I want to do, and I'm not trying to make everyone happy anymore.
You know, I think that is such a vitally important piece, Bob, because you know, we talk about non-negotiables, right? And to not apologize, this is non-negotiable. And people go, yeah, but not in this case, right? And I go, well, there you go. It's no longer a non-negotiable. Non-negotiable means it's non-negotiable. So when you're saying like own it, people go, oh yeah, okay, I own that was my mistake. That's not owning it. That's saying I own that it's my mistake, but that's not owning it. And it's like people say, well, I'm sorry. Or they'll say things like, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's not sorry. That's not what it takes.
I'm sorry you feel that way. That is.
It's like, could I punch you in the nose now or should I wait for a little while? Right. So it's the same thing. And so that I love that you're saying about being just not apologizing for it. This is what really matters to us. This is why it matters to us, and we're willing to live by that. And I love that what you're saying about being willing to chase people away, because here's what I know in all the work that I've done in all the years of doing this, 30 odd years of doing this, and 11 years doing this podcast, almost 12 years doing this podcast, is that every top leader I've met has exactly the same philosophy. Let's try and actually move people out rather than moving them in. So when they come to the door, and it's interesting because as you know, one of my original studies was metaphysical studies, and I studied with rabbis and all these. Yeah. And there's in Judaism, you cannot prophesize. You can't go out and knock on doors and say, come on in, right? And in fact, if you go to a rabbi and you say, I want to become Jewish, they are ordered to slam the doors. And that's in exact words, slam the door in your face 5 times. And it's that and I loved that principle. I thought that's really interesting. And the purpose of it is, why are you here? And that's what they do. They open the door and say, why are you here? I'm here because I want to change my faith. Boom, doors in your face. You knock again. Why are you here? Well, because I'm in love with a Jewish person. Slam, until it becomes yours. And
Yeah.
it's like, this is why I'm here. And it's that same principle that you're talking about in the context of leadership and hiring, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really exhausting to have what you think be what you say and what you do be all different. I do the cultural onboarding for our company, and I'll say when I ask them about previous experiences, I think people are fairly indifferent or neutral on companies that just they had cultures by design or by default, but they didn't say anything, but everyone knew what the culture was. The
Yep.
people that they really hate are the ones where the stuff was on the wall, the training and this, we do that, and no one spoke of that, and no one acted that way, and had nothing, to do with what they do. And I'm this initiative, and maybe a book I want to write around, like kind of fly your flag. Like I don't know why it's much harder to say stuff that you don't believe or say other stuff. If you are a ex-athlete who is super competitive, like a win-lose environment, workaholic, like just tell people that. There's plenty of people that'll want to come work for that company in that environment. But don't say we believe in fairness and teamwork and integrity. Just say like we believe in winning and losing. And like that's how our bonus system is. That's how our company events are. Like, and if you're someone who is like wants to win or walk away when they lose, like you'll love it here. And I don't know, maybe you have to go through a process to get there, but it's so exhausting not to, when I hired someone, the last person I hired, I said, look, I'll drive you, like, here's why you'll love working for me, and here's why you will hate working for me.
And it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Exactly.
Exactly.
I said, I push everything to be better and improve it. So if and this person said, I am so bored in my current job. Like, I want to improve things. I want to get better. And I said, look, but I exhaust people, and here's how I exhaust them. So if that sounds interesting to you, then great. One of my friends is a CEO of a company. It's a small company. They're in the leadership training. They're all ex-military, and they have this great culture, and they have 3 core values. It's really tight. And when he told once at an event, he said that he's the last guy to interview. He's the CEO, and you got a picture like, kind of green beret, like scary guy. And they've interviewed with everyone, and his whole interview is this, the last interview. Eric Kaptulik, he says, so you've met everyone, they like you, you've seen our core values, A, B, and C. Please look at them, make sure that you are them and that you like them, because if you are them, you'll be like Corey here, who's been with us for 10 years, the best job he's ever had. If you are not them, you probably won't make it on the team within 30 days. Choose wisely. That's the last that's the last interview.
Yeah, and my wife and I are often asked when we've been on interviews together, because we ran couples trainings, and we're often asked, we've been asked by friends, we've been asked by associates, we've been asked on interviews, what is the secret to your relationship? Because we've been married 21 years. And I was almost 40 when I got married. And people say, what's the secret? And they say that we were both really clear about who we were.
Yeah.
And the number one rule in our relationship is neither of us will ever ask the other one to change. We'll always ask the other one to grow and develop and evolve based on what they want, but we'll never ask the person to change. And that for me is what leadership is. It's very simple. Here's who I am. And I've done enough work to know that this is who I am. I'm constantly trying to upgrade and improve myself, but this is who I am. And it will drive you batshit crazy if you think you can change it, because you can't. And I think as leaders, like you talk about, flying your freak flag, is owning that. Like, so, we are we're gold medalists. We are always about going for gold. We are the cuddly company, and we love to hold
those
everybody.
both can be great cultures, but the person in company A would probably hate company B, and vice versa, right? I mean, that's what I think about culture. It's self-selecting. I always say, a lot of times when people do an interview, they read off all our awards, and so I always joke and I say, look, just to be clear, I think we're a great place to work for about 2% of the people, and that's our mission, is to find those 2% of the people, because there's some things we think are great about a company culture. Yeah, paying people well and treating them well and otherwise, but to me, a real culture doesn't have these core values like integrity, or like they have a differentiated point of view. Like, we believe you compete to win, or something where you're like, I'm really clear on where this company, or we believe competition drives performance. Like that's not like integrity and friendship and trust. Like that's a differentiated point of view.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's ballsy. And I think that's part of what's missing in leadership, is that people are not willing to be ballsy and say, look, this is who we are, right?
Yeah, and I'll draw the lines for you. So because it's funny, because it didn't even come from me, but like I am constant and never ending improvement, you know, hence the book Elevate, hence my core value, hence what I do. Again, why you would love me or hate me. I'll either, you know, entertain you or exhaust you. Well, when our company was redoing our branding, it actually just all became around better. So better people, better prospects, better performance. Even our branding came around the same theme. And I can tell you, the people that come here and struggle, that is why they, you know, if you don't like the speed, if you don't like ambiguity, like these are actually fundamental tenets that the other people love. They hate routine. They like coming in, like, let's blow it up, let's improve it. Like for some people that's exciting, and for other people that is like their worst nightmare. And so we're really trying to filter that out and be honest with them about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're coming towards the end of the show, so it's time for the lightning round. Are you ready, Bob?
All right, I'm ready.
What's a guilty pleasure for Bob Glazer?
Like airplanes. I'm fascinated with airplanes and knowing what model I'm flying or trying to figure out what plane it is. I play a game with my kids around. They tell me where a plane's going. I tell them the model. So I enjoy that for some reason.
Really?
Yeah.
What is it with that? Do you know?
I don't know. I think I want to be a pilot, but I'm scared to be the one in control of the plane. I don't know exactly.
Have you always had that passion? Have you always had that curiosity about them?
Yeah, I used to love planes when I was a kid, and yeah, part of it's figuring out which one it is. I don't know, but I know a lot about. I have some friends who are really next level, but I know a lot about airplane models.
That's very cool. I will tell you I mean, I've had people say dark chocolate, but I've never heard anybody say that. So that's pretty cool. What's something that you learned recently that kind of took you by surprise, or you're like, wow, I never knew that? Something.
Yeah, I think like the difference between what you said and what someone heard has been highlighted for me a lot recently, and that they can be really very different.
Yeah, that's a constant learning, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
For human beings.
You got to just repeat or ask them to repeat what you heard. You know, it's interesting. I was just having a discussion with someone about how I think we tend to be overly critical, you know, on a lot of our team calls, and this person's only on our all company call, and they said, I actually think we're overly celebratory and don't talk about the problems. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I feel like we talk about the problems all the time. But that person's only on that call. So it was a good perspective for me.
Yeah, we have a process that we teach, which is a communication skill, which is, what did I say? Yeah. What did you hear? And what does it mean? And those are very different. So what I said, what you heard, and what you subjectively think that means. Yeah. We're all about performance. Okay, great. What does that mean?
Right.
Oh, well, that's like, you know, it becomes nebulous up the yin yang for that, you know, because, well, it means that, you know, oh, well, actually, no, it's not where I was coming from at all. Fascinating. Yeah, nice one. As we finish up here, I'd love for you to, we're going to ask you to tell our audience some more about how to get more about you and your company and your book and all those kinds of things. Before we do, I'd love for you to leave us with one piece of practical advice, something you would love for our viewers and our listeners to take action on in the preferably next 24 hours, that would really allow them to get what it is that you've been trying to share with us today.
Let's see, one piece back. So I think if you could get up tomorrow morning and the first hour of the day, don't turn on your phone, don't turn on the computer, read, write, and then pick the 3 most important things that you need to do for the day, and maybe even get one of those 3 done in the first hour, and then kind of run the rest of your day. And I'd be really interested to see if you notice the change or the improvement of really starting that day on offense versus starting it on defense.
That's really solid. Simple, solid, practical advice. Bob, this has been a real pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell our audience where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful resources that you have, including your fabulous new book.
Sure, everything is now in one place. So if you go to robertglazer.com, you can find a Friday Forward, the Elevate podcast, and also the Elevate book at robertglazer.com. That's GLAZER/elevate.
Yep, and it's a great podcast. If you want to go and tune into it, there's all kinds of great stuff on there. There's all kinds of really fabulous resources, and I highly encourage you to grab a hold of the book. I think you'll find that it will certainly awaken some things within you. Again, thank you, Bob, for being with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes by going to our Facebook group or our LinkedIn groups and just look for the Leadership and Loyalty podcast. To find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization, simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Until next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can truly elevate and continue to elevate by flying your freak flag and owning what is truly non-negotiable about who you are and what it is you do. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit, business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.